It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Hoby Wedler to On the Table with Ashley today. When I started to write Hoby's bio, the first thing I came across on the mobile version of the website was, I am Hoby Wedler. I am a PhD chemist. I am an entrepreneur. I am a leader. I am an advocate. I am a speaker. Blind since birth, Hoby seems to have been born to bring people together to help them see and feel new possibilities. We will talk a lot in this episode about Hoby is tuned into his surroundings and what we can learn from doing more of that. Less from our sight and more from our other senses. Hoby has chosen to walk unbeaten paths in his life. He earned his PhD in organic chemistry in 2016 from UC Davis and went on to create a wine tasting in the dark experience with Francis Ford Coppola. He now uses his highly trained palate and acute sensory insight in his work as a product development consultant. Hoby is also a motivational speaker, mentor, and educator focused on making the world both more expansive and more inclusive. He started a nonprofit in 2011 to lead chemistry camps for blind and visually impaired students in North America. Hoby has also co-founded a gourmet seasonings company called Hoby's Essentials, and he co-founded Sensepoint, a creative and marketing firm that works with clients committed to making a positive impact. Hoby has received a number of awards and recognition for his work, including being named a champion for change by President Barack Obama and a leader in food and drink by Forbes Media's 30 Under 30 publication. You can find Hoby at hobywedler.com and on Instagram at Hoby Wedler. Welcome to the podcast, Hoby.
Oh my gosh, Ashley, thank you for that very flattering introduction. It's an absolute honor to be with you, and I really appreciate the invitation. Thank you so much.
Well, let's jump in. I always like to start our discussion with a little bit of where you grew up and what kind of kid you were when you were young.
Yes.
And in your case, and I know that you've been blind since birth, I'm interested in hearing if you were brought up to believe you could do almost anything you put your mind to, or if you had some sense of limitations imposed on you because of your lack of physical sight.
Fascinating. Well, thank you for that great question. First of all, I need to toss in a shout out to your amazing sister Jennifer Golbos, who connected us and made this opportunity come alive. So I'm totally grateful to Jennifer and any great friend of Jennifer's and family member of Jennifer's, a friend of mine. So even though we're just meeting today, I feel like I've known you for a lot longer, and it's really phenomenal to come together and talk about some of the things that we both care so deeply about. Your question is a fabulous one, and one that I think a lot about. I was a very happy kid. So I grew up in Petaluma, California, and compared to a lot of my friends who are very global and international and all this, I have a very boring trajectory. So I travel a lot now for work, but I was born in Petaluma. I was raised in a house about 0.8 miles from where I live now. And I went out to school at the University of California, Davis, as you mentioned, did my undergraduate and graduate work there from 2005 to 2016, and then boomeranged right back to Petaluma to start my businesses. And for me, the way I would describe my life as a kid is very much enjoyable, very happy. I was never a kid that had horrible worries. I was never upset by things. I didn't have to deal with that much trauma. I was, of course, life brings its own set of issues, right, to all of us. But I was overall a very happy kid. And, I was raised with my brother, who was 2 years older, who's completely sighted. And what I'll tell you is that I was born totally blind, but my parents had no idea that I was going to be blind. They did all the genetic testing, everything they needed to do to make sure their baby was going to be okay and everything looked fine. And then I was born on May 30th of 1987, and lo and behold, I had no eyesight. They looked at my eyes very quickly and said, "Oh, there's something majorly wrong with Hoby's eyes." Now, my parents, mind you, had not lived with anyone with eyesight. My mom's cousin's husband then was blind and became a real role model for us. And you know, a few individuals they'd seen crossing streets were blind. They may have helped a little bit, but beyond that, they really did not know what blindness meant, how to deal with blindness, and they didn't know any blind people. So it was this amazing experience for me being born into this family. And I'll tell you a fun story about a phone call that my mom made when I was about 12 hours old. She decided that, okay, it's time to call my friends that the family already knew. It's time to call my best friends, my closest friends, and let them know that Hobie was born, but he happens to be blind. And she called her friend Barb Morgan. Barb's husband Steve answered the phone, and Steve said, "Oh my gosh, it's so great to talk to you, Terry. Tell me." And then my mom started explaining to Barb's husband Steve what happened. And Steve's response was, "Oh no, oh, this is just terrible. Oh, I don't know how we're going to deal with this. What are we going to do about it?" And Barb, being the great and wonderfully maybe impatient person that she is, wanted to know right away what the answer was, and grabbed the phone right out of Steve's hand and said, "What what are you saying? What's wrong? What's going on?" And my mom explained to her that, yeah, Hobie was born, but he's blind. And Barb's response was, "Oh my God, blindness we can deal with. I thought, based on what Steve was saying, he was dead." And to me, that's like, I'm going to write a book sometime called "I'd Rather Be Blind Than Dead," because it's true. And the point here is that Barb was actually raised by a father who was dear, dear friends with, and his closest friend was a professor where he also worked as a professor at Arizona State University. And his friend was blind. And his friend John Hudson was a total handyman. If they needed anything fixed for them, they'd call John. When the dishwasher was broken, they'd call John. When the car needed fixing, they'd call John. And John was just over at their house every day. And Barb, as a young girl, didn't see blindness as a problem. She saw it as just a trait, just like having brown eyes or
Mhm.
gray hair or whatever the case may be. And to me, this was just such an amazing thing because when my mom talked to Barb and realized that blindness was just something that just so happened to be the case, she and my dad both were always amazing role models, but just said, okay, blindness isn't the issue here, and became total allies, 100% supporters, and just people right there in my wheelhouse every step of the way. The two things they did that were so amazing is they never lowered the bar for me. They kept the bar high, 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 and the
Mm.
expectations were right where we'd expect them for anybody. I mean, I was expected to do chores just like my sighted brother. Maybe my chores were a little bit different. One of my chores, which we can get into a little bit later, was cooking soup for the family. And my gift for my 10th birthday was a 42 quart or 10 and a half gallon soup pot because I would make soups for the family, and we would freeze them and either use them as great weeknight dinners, or my parents would take them to work with them for lunches. And just a tremendous, tremendous experience for me, being raised in that background and growing up in that background. And yeah, just really incredible to be able to be that kid doing my own artwork, which was making soups, when I realized that my sighted peers were doing their own artwork by drawing. I was doing my own artwork by mixing flavors.
Mhm.
Pardon me. Yeah, and that was just a truly incredible opportunity. And my parents have been my biggest cheerleaders. They've been my biggest supporters. I'm one of their biggest supporters, and we just make it through. And to answer your question, as a kid, um, I was joyful. I was happy. I had good friends, not a lot of friends, but the friends that I had were friends for life and true gold, as I say. Just amazing, amazing friends. And did I feel held back by my lack of physical eyesight? I don't know. I don't think I quite came to terms with the fact that I was blind until I was about 8 years old. When I realized that, hey, I'm not going to be able to drive. I do things differently. And it was a lot for me to take. But I just said, to hell with it. I'm going to go out there and love life and do my thing. And I've done that ever since I was born, and I love my life. I just, blindness is my biggest gift that I've been given. I think about the world differently than other folks. I do things a little bit differently. And I'm just beyond honored to be blind. Something that a lot of people think of as a true hindrance has become my game changing advantage in the world.
Absolutely. And I think it's very clear from everything that you've done that it is a gift. And I think, I mean, from this conversation, from everything that you're doing, I think you are able to give a gift to sighted people too. And we'll get maybe particularly to sighted people. So we'll get into that as well.
Oh, I can't
I,
wait.
I normally ask guests what led them to their professional field. Parts of what you do are very connected to your personal story. I mean, even hearing that from a child you were making soup, so you were focused on flavors
Right.
and how they mix together as a very, as a 10-year-old, or I guess you got the gift as when you were 10, so you were probably doing it before. That's
Let's doing,
pretty
yeah.
unusual.
Yeah, it's different.
um, but it's not as obvious to me how you ended up pursuing a PhD in organic chemistry. Although I guess, I just recently read what is that book, Lessons in Chemistry, where they talk about the science
Yeah.
and the food. So it does make sense,
Yeah.
it could make sense, but in any
Yeah.
event, I thought it would be helpful if you could tell us about that path,
Yeah.
and then from choosing that as your PhD, how you focused your interests professionally.
I'm so excited to explore that with you. Absolutely. And thanks for the phenomenal question there. Um, yeah, I could talk for hours about this, so I'll keep it concise, but also very informational. I The reason I studied chemistry is because of an amazing high school chemistry teacher. My high school chemistry teacher was the shining light behind the work that I do and really showed me that chemistry is possible. So I had the same instructor for freshman physical science as I did for honors chemistry as a junior. And when I was in her class as a freshman, we did some chemistry work, and I just fell in absolute love with chemistry. It was amazing. It was incredible. It was just something, I don't know how to say this, but I had a knack for it. It made sense to me in so many ways that I I decided that at that point as a freshman that I wanted to study honors chemistry as a junior. And I went back to the same instructor and she said, yeah, take the test. We'll see how you do. It was this funny thing where I I don't think they expected me to really understand that much chemistry, and then I got the high score on the placement test, and it's like, okay, we got to welcome you to honors chem. How do we figure this out? So I worked with a team to really figure out the right strategy and the right way to make it work, and it was so much fun. We found a great assistant who had taken the class the year before me and was just a really cool ally and amazing person that I could follow and work with in the laboratory. And it was yeah, it was incredible. It was an amazing opportunity. And one thing led to another and led to another, and honors chemistry just made sense for me. And the instructor would often say things to us like, "Hey, chemistry is everything. We eat it, we drink it, we live it, we breathe it. Everything around you is chemist." And while the particle physicists who think that they're more fundamental than the chemists may not have liked it, that's what we learned, is that chemistry was how the world revolved around us. And she would encourage us as a class that, chemistry is something that I would love for all of you to pursue and all of you to think about studying further. And don't just think about chemistry as the prerequisite that you need to take and that you need to study to make life happen, but rather think about it as something that's truly a career, and something that you can delve more into than just the boring, quote unquote, boring prerequisite that you think it is. And I would go to her every day and say, I understand that you think chemistry is something that we all should study. And I actually maybe am one of the only ones in the class who really wants to study it and pursue it and do what you're saying and take it to the next level. How do I do this? And she would say, oh, Hoby, chemistry is impractical. Chemistry is not something you want to study. Chemistry is something that is very visual and something that is going to be so difficult for you to study, and maybe you don't necessarily want to do this as your career. And I thought, oh, but I do. Chemistry is everything to me. It's what I want to study. It's who I am. You said it yourself. We live it, we breathe it, we eat it, we drink it. It's all around us. And I thought, how am I going to convince her that chemistry is the right thing for me? And I remember very vividly the second Wednesday of the second semester. It was a cold January morning. Now, you're in Park City, Utah. So when I say cold, I'm talking California cold, which is not the same. And I went up to her classroom an hour before school started because I know she came into prep on Wednesdays, and I knew I was going to have a chance to talk to her. And I said, Lee, I know that you really question my ability to study chemistry, but what I want to tell you is that nobody can see atoms. Chemistry is a cerebral science. And in fact, if you look at the instrumentation that we've created a great deal of instruments just to use as our eyeballs, whether they be nuclear magnetic resonance instruments or infrared spectroscopy instruments or ultraviolet spectroscopy instruments, whatever the case may be. We're using instruments to see molecules and atoms for us, right? And from that point on, Ashley, it was really incredible because this instructor became not only a supporter, but my biggest ally, and someone who just had utmost respect every step of the way and pushed me to my goals and said, I totally respect what you're doing, and wanted to study chemistry at UC Davis. And it just was a total supporter. So flash to the scene, I ended up at UC Davis as an undergraduate chemistry major. And I totally believe there's a higher power. I'm not going to say who because I don't know who behind the work that I do. I've always been blessed with amazing folks who help me out every step of the way and who are just always there to support me. And I can't tell you how many times I've been blessed with amazing folks and amazing opportunities. And when I got to Davis, I was totally blessed with the person who was assigned to me and introduced to me to help me with math and chemistry. She's just an amazing, amazing woman and such an incredible individual. Now, I fell in love with organic chemistry when I first laid my hands on the subject in my sophomore year as an undergraduate student. And people ask me all the time, why organic chemistry? That's the most sort of convoluted visual subject you could ever possibly study. Why would you be interested in organic chemistry? And what I realized, Ashley, is that for me, I realized this as I got more into organic chemistry, and it took some time, but I realized that I use the same skills that I utilize in organic chemistry to think about the world as I use for my survival as a blind traveler, walking the streets, walking from where I am to the local bus stop, walking to the supermarket, doing whatever I need to do. I literally visualize things in my mind. So I take these images in my mind that are roads connected by intersections. And I said, why don't I just reduce meters and kilometers and miles into nanometers and angstroms and think about chemistry, atoms as they connect on the atomic and molecular level, just like I think about streets coming together in a town, right? So the way that I think about chemistry is no different than the way that I think about how to get from where I'm sitting right now, a quarter of a mile to my local bus stop or a half a mile to the supermarket or wherever. And the streets are the bonds, and the ways they intersect are the buildings and intersections of streets. And in chemistry, those intersection points usually happen at atomic centers, right? At nuclei
Mm-hmm.
that come together. And for me, it was like, yeah, this makes sense. Now, I decided early on, probably mainly because of my amazing high school instructor of chemistry, that I wanted to teach chemistry. That was my dream. That was my goal. But I didn't want to teach upper division organic chemistry to, upper division college students. I didn't want to teach graduate classes. The type of chemistry that I wanted to teach was freshman chemistry to graduates or to undergraduate students who are freshmen who just arrive, who I can inspire to really fall in love with whatever their dreams are and inspire to think about whatever it is that they love and really get excited about what they study. I wanted to be the professor at the college or university level who made chemistry truly exciting at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning after a long weekend of partying to a student who thought that chemistry was just this boring subject that they had to get through to do what they truly wanted to do, right? That was my whole dream and desire, was to be the chemistry teacher, to make chemistry inspiring. And while I was in graduate school at the University of California, Davis, I had the honor of teaching many general chemistry courses. And I learned two things while I did this. Number one, I totally love teaching. That was never a doubt in my mind, that I loved teaching and I loved helping other people connect to what they truly love as well. Number two, I learned that my students don't like to speak chemistry. They wanted to see visuals and pictures and little video animations and all this stuff. I created beautiful PowerPoint slides for them to follow my verbiage and the words that I spoke exactly. But it didn't quite make sense for them they didn't quite like to follow my words and the way that I spoke chemistry, because maybe they didn't speak that exact language quite yet. So one thing led to another, and after teaching many graduate courses and many undergraduate courses in chemistry while I was a graduate student, I realized that yes, I totally still want to get my PhD, but I want to utilize my teaching in other areas. And in 2011, I was so honored to have been contacted by Francis Ford Coppola himself and his team. And Francis Ford Coppola, if you don't know him, is a film producer and a movie director. He did projects like The Godfather and Apocalypse Now and Supernova and all sorts of things. And, he said, hey, I got your name through a friend, and I really want to design a wine experience. And I, by the way, had taken wine courses at UC Davis, intro to winemaking, and a couple of graduate courses also on sort of the hardcore biochemistry of wine and related to sensory and how we sort of pair those things together. So for me, one thing led to another, and I realized over time that, my dream, my goal is to teach in terms of wine and food and
Mm.
use what I love about teaching to teach people about wine and food. And because Francis Ford Coppola knew that I'd done this work, he reached out and he said, I've done an experience in Asia around food and getting little treats delivered to me under blindfold. And I know we can do better than that at my wineries. And we started this out as a hospitality experience. So for general consumers at the winery, we do this every uh, 2 weeks or so. And then eventually the national sales team picked it up. And I was able, because I was a computational chemist as a graduate student, I was able to, and my advisor was very lenient and said, do what you want to do. Learn what careers are out there for you. And I ended up traveling a lot with Mr. Coppola's team and really doing a blitz of the country uh, over the next 2-3 years, and realized that my passion was for teaching people about food and beverage and explaining food and beverage in different ways, and using my chemistry knowledge to, lack of a better word, translate um, science into flavor and into explainable terms that folks could connect with and understand and sort of delve into. So for me, that's why I got my PhD in chemistry. I was always a food guy, a foodie, but that's kind of what led me into product development. But as I like to say, I have the heart of a teacher, and once a teacher, always a teacher, and I'll never give up.
So you started Tasting in the Dark when you were actually a graduate student. Are you still working on that program today? And can you
Absolutely.
explain it to people what you do in that program?
Absolutely. It's a great question. So one of the sort of the thing that one of the things I'm most proud of in my career is designing Tasting in the Dark, which is a truly blindfolded experience around food and beverage, where we start out by having, basically everybody blindfolds themselves, and we use our temporary lack of eyesight not as a game or as a gimmick like a lot of dining in the dark experiences do, but rather as a way to focus our attention and home our attention in on unique experiences, on things that maybe we haven't experienced before, and to utilize our hyper-focused attention, excuse me, experiences that we haven't experienced before, and to utilize our hyper-focused lens of not having eyesight temporarily to focus on the flavor and aroma of new products that we might be interested in, or that I can introduce you to. And one of the things there was, when we started, was really figuring out how to explain what I taste in products and allow other people to understand it. So we start with basically having folks put the blindfold on, and then we have a deep conversation about the art of food and beverage, and the art particularly about around the art around whatever we're tasting. And then we go into an experience all around warming up our aromatic vocabularies by smelling different compounds and thinking through what they smell like, because we're so in tune with our visual sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
I tested this out. I held a red pen, up in front of my nephew who's 6 years old, and I said, "Hey, Rito, tell me what color this is." And he said, "Oh, Uncle Hoby, that's obvious. This is red." But then I held a peach up to his nose and didn't let him look at it, and he had a very hard time. He said, "This is fruit." So it's like we're very in tune with our eyesight because we use it so incredibly commonly. But how in tune are we with our other senses, our sense of smell, our sense of taste, or even our sense of touch, and our sense of what we hear around us? So this experience is designed to show people what sort of amazing art form we have when it comes to food and beverage. Number two, to really discuss and amplify what we mean when we talk about experiencing things in a new light, when we don't technically have our eyesight to experience them through. And number three, really connecting with products and experiences on a new level. And so once we sort of warm up our aromatic vocabulary with aromas that I build for people, I custom build them to represent and replicate the products that we'll be smelling and tasting in the future. And then we taste through and talk about exactly what we're tasting, and and what the experience is like. And it's really good for three audiences I've found. It's great for number one, buyers. So if you're a stakeholder at a brand of any food or beverage, we can do this and have a great time with it. What I'll say is that, through a combination of things, I built this tasting out, and it's great for three audiences. It's great for folks who, number one, have a food and beverage brand and are either marketing directors or owners of the brand or whatever, and they want to engage with stakeholders in a way that's going to change a product from some entry deep on page 384 of a catalog to something people remember and talk about for months
Mm-hmm.
and often years to come. Number two, audiences that want a really great offsite for their team and they want to do something fun and engaging, maybe as part of a conference or what have you. And then we can pull this together for them. And number three, it's great for an audience for folks who want to build empathy within a team. So I've expanded this to even beyond food and beverage to really think through, team building. And when people don't have that eye contact and they can't make that connection, how do they talk to one another? How do they connect with one another?
Mm-hmm.
So it's an incredible experience. I've loved the journey of developing it and building it into what it is now. And now is no different. I'm just so honored and excited to have this as part of my repertoire and my bailiwick of what I do.
And do you do any surveys after the fact to see if there are lasting benefits that participants
We do.
enjoy?
Yeah, we do. And everybody says, I've never experienced wine that way. I've never experienced whatever food we're tasting that way. I'm going to remember this forever, and I'm going to remember the products that we tasted. So, yes, I mean, the feedback is unanimous. And I feel very blessed to have an experience that people resonate with and truly love so much.
Well, it sounds amazing. We were talking before we started recording about you coming to visit Park City, and now I think maybe we could do a tasting in the dark in Park City. That would be amazing.
Ashley, I would love that. I'd love that. And then maybe we can hop on a ski lift later on in the day and head down a
Absolutely.
slope.
Absolutely. So I had a question about, is there any, I'm sure there are a lot of obstacles that you've faced in the pursuit of your personal and professional
Yeah.
ambitions. And even just hearing about your high school chemistry teacher, and then obviously at both a collegiate and a PhD level, having to work in with objects that sighted people use for specifically for the study, that particular area of study. I could think of, there could be a number of obstacles there, but I don't want to choose one for you. If you could talk about maybe one or two obstacles that you faced and how you overcame them and what you think sighted people can learn from them, I think that
Yeah.
would be really helpful.
No, I love it. I love it, Ashley. Thank you for the great question. For me, it's a complex question because while there have been obstacles, I feel like the biggest thing that we have to overcome anything is our brain. And our brain is our organ that can tell us it's the biggest barrier to success and it's the biggest opportunity for success if it treats us right and allows us to think about things right. So I have struggled in the past with in chemistry. I'll talk about chemistry with um, not the chemistry itself. That ironically maybe has never been the hardest part of studying chemistry. For me, the hardest part of studying chemistry has been getting material from the very visual medium where it's presented into my mind and needing to use great readers and assistants for that. And then getting that material from and what I do, getting my results, basically, for lack of a better word, from my mind back into that visual community. And the way that I've overcome that is by connecting with people and talking to people and really just creating relationships with great people who can be immensely helpful to me as I go through that process, right? Basically, folks who can design figures, folks who can talk to me about what they're doing, and I can work with them to get what I know into the visual world and to get things from the visual world into my head. So it's all collaboration there. And one of the other obstacles that I've faced, so I'm gonna tell a very vulnerable story here, if I may, without mentioning company names, of course. But at one point, just before graduation, I was applying to one of the largest food brands in the world for a job that was given to me, that was sort of offered to me as a translator between their R&D team, their hardcore R&D team, and the marketing and sales team. And what I really wanted to do for them is help them translate some of the stuff that they were doing and that I was helping with a little bit with their R&D team to and the scientific item, topics of discussion to the sales and marketing team. And it was a day and a half long interview. I gave a great talk about my science. I had great meetings with everybody. The only person who I struggled with was the HR director. And she was just very skeptical about having a blind person come to work for them. And about a week and a half later, I got a call saying from the HR director, "You're not qualified for our position. We're just not interested in you. Have a great day." And it was very cold and very direct. And my ally at that company reached out a few days later and said, "Hey, I want to tell you, you were actually perfectly qualified. We all want you to work. The reason you were said to be underqualified was because HR was afraid of the liability you'd cause our company." And to me, it was like, okay, wow. So like, I'm going to cause you a liability. I you don't believe in me necessarily. So I said, well, what the heck with it? I'm going to work for myself. And that's one of the big things that prompted me to work with my amazing life partner and now business partner, Justin, to launch the companies that we have now. We have the product development company. We have a marketing company, which is the only blind-owned marketing company in the world that we know of. We've got a couple of companies based on emotional design and one on art and fashion, based out of Italy, by the way. So there's so much fun to be had here. But I realized pretty quickly after school, or while I was still in school technically, that I needed to really paint my own picture and start my own company myself in order to thrive, in order to do what I wanted to do. And, you know, yeah, are there obstacles in people being able to fully understand what I can do and my capabilities? Absolutely. They're there for sure. But you overcome them with a positive attitude and by telling yourself that anything's possible. And if you can, in a calm and collected and relaxed way, portray that to others, that's how we win. That's how we
Yeah.
succeed in this world. And yeah, is being blind going to be a lot more work than folks who are sighted? Absolutely. But my parents taught me good work ethic. I'd go to school all day. My brother and I would get home from school. We'd do homework. What would take my sighted brother maybe 2 or 3 hours would take me 4 or 5. And then, especially during the summer, we'd go out and work on the house until it was dark. So my parents, maybe because they wanted to train me and my brother how to have good work ethic, never hired anybody to do anything around the house. So it was all on us. And they were helpful too. And, we did everything together, but everybody had high expectations of each other. And those are some of the ways that I overcame those obstacles. But really, I'll say this again and again and again throughout our show, that I think it's our brains that are our best motivational organ that we have.
I completely agree with that. And I have 2 teenage boys, and they don't think that I know very much at this point. Hopefully, at some point, they will recognize
They'll come
my life
around.
experience. But I tell them all the time, what you think is what will be. And if you think you're going to have a bad day, guess what? You're probably going to have a bad day. And if you go into a test thinking, I really am going to do well on this test, you have a much better chance. So our brain is extremely powerful. We
Yeah.
actually, Jennifer and I talked about this on our episode as well. And it can be powerfully in a positive or a negative way. And we have to train our brains. And I actually think that that is lifelong work, because we all have ups and downs in our lives and things that make us lose faith in ourselves, whether it's other people losing faith in us or us not
Yeah.
performing to our potential. But it's an up and down, and we have to work on it all the time. But our brain can be our biggest ally if we do the work.
It's our biggest asset and it's our biggest liability.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it's
absolutely.
amazing what your brain can do for you if you just let it.
Yeah.
If you just let it function. I mean, just thinking about the way that we dream at night, the way that we experience sort of life in a different way when we go to sleep. That's all thanks to the brain.
Yeah.
It's kind of an amazing thing. And for me, although my dreams aren't visual, they're very, very tactile and very audio and very sensory. But like, I'm blown away by what my brain teaches me while I'm asleep.
Yeah. Well, that could be a whole other podcast about your dreaming. That sounds
I
fascinating.
can't wait.
I would like to dive into your perspectives on our senses. I watched your TEDx talk in Sonoma, and you tell a story in that talk about a day you went with some friends to a large field, and they asked you if you wanted them to describe how green the field was and how beautiful the vista was. And you replied that no, you really didn't need them to do that. Green for you was not something that had meaning, but you smelled the field, you heard the birds, you felt the moisture in the air, and you had your own deep experience that had absolutely nothing to do with sight. Could you describe that experience or another experience and how you use your senses, and what you think we can learn from that? And I'll just add this, that also in that TEDx talk, you talked about how sighted people rely on their eyesight for 90 to 95% of our sensory input. And
Yeah.
I was both astonished, I guess, and not astonished by that,
Yeah.
because when I think about it, it does make sense to me. So I think that part of it is, and I think you have a big focus in all of your work on getting people to use, and there are other senses in that, like muscles, we have to work them out kind of, and constantly use them. And so maybe that's part of this as well. But I thought that was another just fascinating statistic.
Yeah. Thank you for that great question, Ashley. I'll take it in two parts. I first want to start by just describing what we can take in when we're not focused on eyesight. In that experience on Wilson Hill, precisely here in Sonoma County, where I am right now, that I described, where I was standing, you know, I didn't stop my friends from describing the visuals to me. I always want to know as much as I can about everything. So that includes the way that people perceive the space visually. But I also understood so much non visually. The smell of the air, creating aromatic symphonies of oak and eucalyptus and bay laurel, blending with fresh cut grass and other elements in the air. It created an aromatic symphony that was nothing short of beautiful. Um, the air was thick and cool, and like you said, I could feel the moisture, and my feet sank slightly into the soil. So I took away all this data from the experience, right? All this information. And when I got in the car with my friends and drove away, they were all sighted, by the way. And I explained the experience that I got. They were just so dumbfounded. And their response was, "What? We were looking at it, man. We didn't get it." And I had to say, "No, you didn't get that because you were so busy focused on what your eyes were telling you that you couldn't necessarily focus in on these other senses." So the comment about us using 90 to 95% of our sensory input on eyesight is true because eyesight is easy. I think of the senses in order of least vulnerable to least vulnerable to most vulnerable as we go through them. And eyesight is the least vulnerable. You can look up at the moon sometimes and see it. Heck, you can look at the sun and see it. You can look up at night and see stars that are light years away. So you're not threatened by the nasty conditions of space and anything that could affect you as you look up at the star and see the night sky, or as you look up and see the sun, or you look up and see the moon, right? You're there and you're able to do it, right? You can drive a car with the windows closed. So eyesight is just not very vulnerable. When we hear something, we have to be close enough that we can hear it. So sometimes you might be able to hear music from a mile away. But if I'm talking to you and we're not virtual and we're in person, I need to be close enough to you, probably within 30 or 40 feet, so that I can hear you. Just being close and exposing ourselves is more vulnerable. I think that's why we use our hearing a little less. If we're going to touch something, I just set my hand down on the table that I'm sitting at. We need to be able to make contact with it, tap it, touch it, feel it, right? And one super nerdy thing is that when we touch things, we're not actually touching them. We're actually feeling the electronic repulsion between the palm of our hand and the electrons on the surface we're touching. So you're not actually really touching anything when you think you're touching something, which is kind of funny to think about. But then when we get to smell and taste, so when you touch something, you have to be close enough that you can feel it and make it a part of you when you touch it. When we smell something, we're breathing fumes into our body and we're literally making that vapor a part of us. And when we taste something, we're putting something in our mouth. So we have to trust the source of whatever we're putting in our mouth just so innately and positively, right? That it creates this whole sort of dynamic and interesting thought process about how do we use our senses. And for me, I've learned to use my non-visual senses to absorb the world around me. And I think oftentimes sighted folks, when I explain how I perceive the world, are really surprised and excited by it as well,
Mm-hmm.
because they can see that future perhaps for them too. But that's my story about senses in a nutshell, and how that sort of talk and the blindfolded tastings that I do and all this stuff really ties into everything else that I do.
Can you share a bit about sensory design, which you describe as the fine line between art and science? And you said in your talk that science fills our toolbox and art is how we use those tools. And you gave one example about the sound of a car door closing in a less expensive versus a luxury car. And because of the sensory experience in the luxury car, it's a very soft close. And in the less expensive car, it's kind of a harsh close, which I think is something people can just, viscerally relate to, that if they think about it, oh yeah, I understand. If I just closed my eyes and I heard a car door closing, I would be able to tell you if it's a luxury car or not.
Right.
And you talk about how non-visual and subconscious sensory data play into our buying decisions. I'm sure this is something that you work on a lot in your professional life. And I thought you could maybe give us an example that you are working on or have worked on, and how you use your expertise to help companies in
Oh,
product development.
I love this question, Ashley. Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing this to the forefront. Yeah, I truly believe from a design perspective that um, designers, they're often graphic designers, even industrial designers, use their eyesight so much because, as we talked about a minute ago, it's the main sense that we have, and it's the one that we really know how to use, right? However, there's so much that we can gain from the world if we're not hyper focused on what our eyes are telling us, and we're really focused on what our other senses are telling us. So to me, sensory design is that element of design which is, yes, visual. Yes, things need to look good and they need to be catchy, right? But also, how do they feel? How do they sound? How do they smell? How do they taste? Right? So, this is a funny story that I'm going to tell you. I can't say the name of the company that hired us, but a big tech company in Cupertino, California, that makes a certain variety of smartphones and laptops and things like that they need glass surfaces for, whether it be the surface on your smartphone or the trackpad for a laptop. You might be able to guess what company I'm talking about. Reached out to their glass supplier in 2017 and said, we need a glass that feels more silky. And the glass company said, well, we just produce glass for tech companies and for the construction industry and for the automotive industry and all these things. We're not really focused on what do we mean by more silky? Like what, we're not focused on that as much. So they then went and said, okay, we need to get this figured out. We need to get to the bottom of this. And they went ahead and hired a big design firm called IDEO. I don't know if you heard of them,
Mm-hmm.
IDEO.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And IDEO said, well, we're going to try different things with different chefs and different opportunities. And how do we describe glass texture? And then they said, well, we're not hitting the mark quite right, but we know this crazy sensory guy up in the North Bay, and we're going to call him. So they called me, and we ended up doing a tech day with this client where we paired 4 different glass textures with, at one station, fruit, both dried and fresh fruit. At another station, cheese, both hard and soft cheeses, and different textures that the cheese might have on your palate. And at a final sort of way to crown the day off and close everything out, we did a wine tasting for all 700 people that were there, basically pairing wine texture. Some were bubbly, some were red, some were white, with the texture of the glass. And from this deep exploration of texture of glass, we realized that glass texture has really 2 dimensions. Glass can either be something that is very sticky, where your finger doesn't want to slide, or something that's slick, where your finger slides right across it. Glass can also be either very smooth, where your finger just is effortlessly moving across it. It's almost like a really light, amazing cream cheese, or very rough, almost like an aged Gouda or a Beamster or even an aged cheddar cheese, right? Where you feel a little bit of attractiveness. So after this tech day, the client chose the glass surface that they use in their smartphones. And to this day, to the best of my knowledge, this was 7 years ago, still to this day, they use that glass surface. So that's one example of showing someone, hey, how can all this fit together in a way that makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I use my senses, and that's how I use sensory design.
That's a great story. I think we can maybe guess the company.
No guesses on live air, okay?
No,
No.
not here.
Yeah.
Not here.
Yeah.
So in a recent podcast I was listening to, it's called 10% Happier with Dan Harris. He had Deepak Chopra on as a guest.
Oh my gosh.
And Deepak Chopra was talking about consciousness and the difference between what he called provisional identity and common identity. He explained that the localized I for a localized identity is what he called a bad habit. And he said the localized I or identity is the conditioned mind. At birth, you're given a name, ethnicity, national identity, economic identity. You're cited or you're not cited. But the deeper non-localized
Did he use the word
identity,
cited and uncited?
He actually didn't say that. I added that.
I love
but
that.
He talked about the fact that at birth you're given an identity.
Right.
You were given the name Hoby. I was given the name Ashley.
Right.
All of these things give us a sense of who we are, but his point is it's actually not really who we are. Yeah. So he says that the deeper non-localized identity is awareness, and the common human identity is the only real absolute identity in his view. So I, Ashley, or you, Hoby, are provisional identities. And Deepak says that when we stop identifying with the ego, body, mind, and we go back to the real non-localized identity, then, and this is a quote, he says, then I'm free of the judgments that are in the skin encapsulated ego, body, mind.
Hmm.
And I listened to this several times, and what it seems to be saying to me is calling out this deeper level of awareness or consciousness. And I couldn't help but wonder if you feel your lack of sight through your eyes brings you closer to this non-localized identity and a deeper state of awareness or consciousness. And I
Wow.
wanted to see if you had any thoughts about that.
Wow, that's an incredible question. And to answer it correctly, I need to think about it a little bit and go back and really consider some things that have happened to me. The answer is yes. The answer is but it's not just me. So here's the thing about me happening to be blind, right? I am not my sense. I claim, this is a contention of mine, that my senses are no better than yours, right? My hearing isn't better. My sense of taste isn't better. My sense of smell isn't better. My sense of touch isn't better. However, for my survival as a blind person, to give an example, I've had to really build on and enhance my sense of hearing because when I walk across a street in a busy area, I need to listen to traffic as a blind person. And when I hear the flow of traffic, I know it's safe to cross in a certain direction, right? So if I'm not using my ears correctly, I'm probably going to get run over and killed. So I need to train my ears more precisely. In terms of my smell and my taste, I wasn't born with a sharper sense of smell than you just because I lack eyesight. But I, in two ways, need my sense of smell to be really good. In one way that's a little bit subconscious, I need it to get around my surroundings. Sometimes in familiar areas, I know that when I smell orange blossoms, I'm near my home because my neighbor has an orange tree. Or if I smell a particular type of food, I'm near the Scandinavian restaurant downtown. I know I'm pretty close, but I use subconsciously, mind you. I use my nose to know where I am, but for professional reasons, I've had to train my palate to be a very good and very astute palate over the past, I'd say, 25 years. Is my palate better than yours? No, I don't think it is. But I think I've worked hard to train it just like someone who plays guitar might work really hard on practicing the guitar, right? So I feel like my well trained palate is just the same as someone's amazing expertise in playing music. Could I play guitar? Sure. Could you play guitar? Sure. Do we dedicate our time to learning about it? Not necessarily. But what I'm trying to say here is that my sense of lack of eyesight does not build those skills. It's my need and desire to train them that builds them. In terms, and I answer that question with that beginning, the question that you asked about consciousness, with that beginning, because I don't necessarily feel like my mind is different than other people's. However, I'm able to focus on things more intently than others I've been around. Like when I open my window outside, I'm sitting here at my island in my kitchen, and I open my window, and it's beautiful. It's the Ides of March. It's March 15th, and the aroma of springtime is pouring in my window. I can smell flowers outside like jasmine. I can smell the grass that was recently cut a few days ago. There's a small element of honey on the air. I don't know where that's coming from. I smell there's a tree that was cut down near us, so I can smell the sort of fresh bark of that tree and the freshness there. So I can focus in on these things. And I truly believe that being blind and living in a sighted world, which is very hard because sight gives us an advantage, I'll shut my window at this point. But I feel like sight gives us an advantage. Eyesight, I should say, gives us an advantage in understanding the world around us and connecting with the world around us. So without that, it's different. I have to focus on things differently. And yes, I have I'm tuned in to my subconscious more than most, I would say. And I'm really good at feeling what my subconscious needs at any given time. And I have not, as a person, your questions are so good. I just have to commend you because I'm really needing to think about this, which I love. As a person, I am connected with what I think of as sort of the overall tapestry of spirituality. And I'm okay with the fact I love my life and I'm afraid of death, like I think a lot of us are. I really am. I'm just going to be bold and say that. But I feel like I'm going to understand where I'm going in an interesting way when that happens to happen, when that time of my life comes, right? Because it has to happen to all of us. That's part of the sort of rite of passage that we take on as people, as animals, as plants, is that, we're born and we all will die someday, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's an interesting thing to think about for me where that comes into play. And I truly feel blessed with an understanding of my subconscious better than I feel most have. And I feel blessed that I have an ability to really see who I am as a person beyond my name, beyond what I look like, beyond what I sound like, and sort of more who I am based on not only life experiences that I've had, but also just the way that I connect with and love the world.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And it was a really interesting podcast episode that I listened to, and it made me think a lot. And, I had written a question that was more focused on, what I'm really trying to do, both with this podcast and my brand, Amatand, is to increase curiosity and decrease judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have to imagine that you judge people less quickly than sighted people do. So
So I'm working on a
we,
book called It's Not What It Looks Like. Don't judge a
okay.
book by its cover. Because I feel like so often we judge things by our immediate experience, by what we see, by what we experience, by what we interpret. But some of my favorite, most amazing connections in life, Ashley, have been people who I sit down next to randomly on trains, on buses, on airplanes, who might have a certain look about them. I don't know what they look like, but it doesn't
Right.
matter to me. I was chatting with some friends of mine last week, and it's like they happen to be black, and I didn't even know it. But does that matter to me? Absolutely not, because people are people for who they are, right? We can't judge a book by its cover. It's this interesting thing of like, you don't care if a dog is black or brown or gray or white or yellow or whatever, green, whatever the color may be. They're a cool, happy dog, right? So why do we judge people any differently? Right. So I didn't mean to interrupt your question, but I have very, very particular opinions here. And one of the things that I think is so exciting about Amatand that you're building is a brand of amazing products and a brand of culture, if you will, that has a feel and an appreciation that allows you. So I'm holding this teacup in my hand right now, right? It's such a beautiful cup because it allows me to experience the world and experience this cup of tea in a way that's very special, but in a way that I'm not constantly reminded of, oh, you've got this great teacup in your hand. It just feels natural. The ceramic is slightly rough, and it just holds brilliantly in my hand. So you're creating a brand, in my opinion, that isn't judgy and that shouldn't be judged, if that makes sense.
I love it. Yes.
Like, how did you arrive at the brand that you've developed and the textures that you have? Because they're so non-judgy and non-assuming and brilliant. But for me, it's hard to arrive at that. So how did you get there?
Well, I am a recovering lawyer, so I spent a lot of years in
Oh
a
my
very different
gosh.
profession, but my mother always laid a beautiful table and was wonderful at
Hmm.
entertaining. And
Hmm.
I have a sister who's a graphic designer. My other sisters love music and have written
Yeah,
music. So this is maybe my artistic bent
I love it.
combined with the experience that I've had both professionally and personally in terms of feeling like as a society, we really need to get back to more human connection and the ability to have difficult conversations and talk even when we don't agree, which I think we're not very good at right now in this
We're
country
not.
or maybe this
No, we're
world.
not.
And so, as a combination of all of those things, and then I have a recent episode with a wonderful man named Tom Boudet, who's a marketing expert. He spent his entire career, almost his entire career at Nestle, lived
Wow.
in Switzerland for many years. And he took me and Dylan, who works with me as a designer and a partner in this business, through an exercise that he calls brand essence. And so you basically, I know we probably did it in about 4 hours. And on
Yeah.
one piece of paper, you end up basically putting into very few words why you've done this business, what you're trying
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
achieve, what your mission and goal is, so that you can remain true to it in
Yeah.
everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
And so we did that. And then
I
for
love
every
this.
product, it's really a combination of what my goals are for the product
Hmm.
from a practical perspective. So how much volume does it hold if it's a mug? We have a beautiful cutting board and I put cutouts on the bottom so that it's easy to pick up and move, which many cutting boards are not, it's not easy to do that.
I want to buy that cutting board. I can't wait. I'm going to do it today.
It is, I use it almost every day. I absolutely love it. And we also have an artistic part around the edges of it. So it has a lot of movement in the wood as well.
Wow.
So we try to think about how are we going to use this object? How are we going to store this object? How
Yeah.
are we going to clean this object?
Yeah.
And and then what experience can we have with this object? So when you were talking earlier, and I'm not going to get the words right, but when we're touching something, we're not actually touching it. It's some
Yeah.
electromagnetic,
Yeah.
whatever you said.
Yeah.
Whatever we're doing when we are touching something, to me, and you said something beautiful, like you're connecting to the object. I might not be getting the words exactly
No,
right, but
you're
I
exactly
really
right.
believe that.
Yeah.
I really believe that when you interact with an object, it can be a very meaningful experience.
Hmm.
And if we can surround ourselves with these objects that are very thoughtfully made, it makes it easier to connect with other people and have those discussions that maybe are not as comfortable
Right.
and not as easy. And we can sort of progress as people.
You know what's so interesting about what you just said there? Thank you for that. First of all, I love that. But for me, there's so much power in being thoughtful and intentional in the art and design that we create, because the things that take the most time to produce are the things, in my opinion, that are easiest to enjoy. So the books that are easiest to read took the most time to produce. Mona Lisa took Da Vinci months, if not years, to construct, and it looks so effortless, but it's such a complex work from his mind. And that's the sense I get from your artwork, is that it's really, you know, something from the mind, something from the soul. and something that takes a lot to produce. And I say this actually during my tasting in the dark. It's one of my classic reminders to folks about wine when I'm using wine as the product. The easiest, I don't know if you drink wine, but
I do.
to me, the easiest wines to enjoy are the ones that are the hardest to make from the hardest sought
Mm.
after grapes, and that are just, they're not better necessarily. I'm not going to ever say they're better, but they're the ones that have just pure love poured into them. And I truly think it's your legal career as well that's playing into the artistry behind what you're doing here to create these amazing products and these amazing experiences for people. And and I totally agree with a mug that is comforting in the hand. We're able to have conversations that are harder. And when I think back to, I'm a history, this is a little known fact about me, is that I didn't know that chemistry was going to work out for me as a blind person. So I'm a history major as well and studied post World War II United States history predominantly. And what I love even about the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s is that, boy, oh boy, people could sit down, whether you're very liberal or very conservative or somewhere in the middle, sit down with the other side and have a conversation and engage and hear what they think and consider it truthfully, and really think through this stuff. So I love the challenging conversation, right? The conversation that really pushes us to the next level and makes us think and makes us consider. And the conversations that are best for me are the ones that make me consider and question the decisions I've made. And why have I made those decisions? And what is my reasoning? And do I want to go back and think about things a little more? And with great tableware, you're creating that.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. And it's funny you mentioned Leonardo da Vinci because I actually recently read Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson. I'm not sure if
Yeah,
you've
it's
read it. It's quite a long
amazing.
book.
One of the best.
Okay, so you have read it.
Yeah.
So one thing that surprised me, which probably maybe did not surprise you, was how much of a scientist Leonardo da
Oh,
Vinci
he's an
was.
incredible biologist. Yeah.
So he dissected at least 30 cadavers
Right.
to understand not only how muscles and tissue work, but he also, and this is so interesting, he wanted to try to understand how emotions were tied physically to our bodies.
Right.
And he was interested in all of this, one, so that he could depict humans accurately in his art. And I think the Mona Lisa is fascinating because he held on to art pieces for many of them for most of his life, and he would just consistently add to them over time. So it did take him a very long time. But he had an innate curiosity, just aside from his artwork, about how the body works, and really, frankly, went to extraordinary lengths, especially at his time,
Mm-hmm.
to understand it. And I feel like you are also a wonderful combination of loving science and art.
I love science
So,
and art so much. It's just, it brings
so
me alive.
can you talk a little bit about how they both play such an important role in your life and how important it is for you to bring them together in your work?
Oh my gosh. Yes. So you mentioned it earlier in our chat that, I believe that science, in a very general sense, fills our toolbox with tools, right? It's the hammer, it's the nail, it's the piece of wood that we use to construct the building, it's whatever. Art is how we do that construction, what our decision is, how we choose to build it, all this stuff. And for me, there's such a fine line between the two. So wine is a great example of a field that straddles that intersection between art and science so beautifully. Wine is made, in my opinion, by artists who happen to know a little bit of biochemistry, but it's also incredibly scientific, coming from the vineyard, coming from how much irrigation the vineyard received, etc. So it's such a sort of art science duo, if you will. And I want to tell you about a company that I'm just in the process of co-founding right now called Emotitech. Emotitech, Emotitech, is a company that we're building here in the U.S., but we've just acquired an Italian firm along with amazing Italian partners to build this business with. And it is my absolute mecca of a way to combine art and science. What we do is we're product and experience designers at the forefront. That's what we do. We're a boutique, unique, and in my opinion, really fun design studio where of course we're going to use our lived experience to design. Of course we're going to talk to people and get their feedback and this sort of thing. But instead of and design to me is art and science in and of itself. The science is how we figure out what people like, and the art is how we design it, and then presenting those products in a way that people can totally, or experiences, products or experiences in a way that people can totally appreciate. So what we're doing at Emototech is trying to twist design thinking on its head a little bit and saying, okay, we can sit down with people and we can ask them, what do you think of this packaging? How does this sound? How does this feel? How does this thrive? What are you experiencing? How does this all work? Right. But then when push comes to shove, that's sort of old school design thinking, right? So for me, I love the idea of collecting biometric data, and that's exactly what Emototech is doing. So put a product or an experience in front of someone and say, you're riding in this beautiful BMW. How does this feel under you?
Mhm.
What does it smell like? Measuring heart rate, measuring breathing rate, putting electroencephalograph devices, EEG devices on people's heads, and looking from a neurological perspective at what their emotional response is. Are they triggered? Are they happy? Are they enjoying this? And then looking at, this is a really fun one for me, every time we move a muscle, every time we grab a cup and pick it up or whatever we may do, we're exerting electrical current, and that is traveling through our body, right, to make us do what we do. And by virtue of that, when our heart beats, when our uh, anything happens, and by virtue of all that, we we have this amazing sort of current running across our skin. And if we can pick that up using a technique called galvanic skin response, we can see what people's emotions are, positive or negative, based on the current flows that we see across their skin. So we're by no means expert in the actual equipment design to acquire the data, but we're experts in the data that we get. And one of the things that I feel like we don't get, that most companies don't do very well, is either the company is going to be great at storytelling and art, or great at acquiring the data and science and then delivering that
Mhm.
data to someone else. But what I deeply love about what we're doing is that we're out there collecting both the scientific data, and then running the artistic process that we have to tell the story and design great products and ultimately help folks market in a very positive and productive and creative way. I also love science. I love product development in the food and beverage industry. That's under my consulting company that I own with my amazing business partner, Justin, and life partner. And, that's kind of what we do in that business, which is quite scientific. And then in the other business that we have, which is a marketing company for designed to market nonprofit agencies that are working with folks with disabilities, called Sensepoint. We're the only blind owned marketing agency that I know of in the country right now. We're using our artistic skills and thinking about how to describe things, how to storytell in the best way possible. And one of the things to give a very practical example with Emototech, we design products and experiences, like I say, with scientific research and biometric data. But one of the projects that we were just hired by, I can share this finally now, BMW Italy to do, is to research different paints. So we do a lot of art installations, public art installations that are totally legal, have a story behind them. But like, okay, so we can paint a wall for you and make it really, really beautiful. But if we're going to do that, we need to coat it with something. So we're investigating a couple of different paints that are transparent that can coat surfaces. One is a combination of fluorinated hydrocarbons in polymer form that lasts. We tested it with very corrosive acids and oxidizing agents that did not budge, did not get touched. And it has a 60-year shelf life, but I think it's good for several hundred years, to be honest with you. And then the other one that we're testing that can even go over this fluorinated hydrocarbon network is something that actually sequesters pollutants from the environment and oxidizes them using a chemical called titanium dioxide to oxidize these little chemicals that we interact with in the environment that create brown smog and smoke and produces CO2 and water out of them. So not only helping the environment, but also making art installations last for a very, very long time. So we're doing the science there, and then we're also doing the artwork to really paint and excite the senses with art. And to me, there's no better sort of combination of sort of straddling that intersection, which again is a very, very fine intersection between art and science.
Well, thank you for that answer. And it leads me to another question, which is, you have so much going on. You have all these
Too much.
businesses. And so you have a bunch of different businesses. How do you prioritize? When is it too much? How do you organize your professional life?
I'm dealing with that right now, and I'm realizing that a lot is a lot, and that I need to cut back and really focus. But the way that I organize my professional life is that I take time every day for each thing, and I don't think about other things while I'm doing that. So, you know, for instance, I'm not working on the design company today because you and I are talking. I had other stuff going on. I have projects going with a food and beverage company. And like next week, I'm going to be in New Orleans for the food and beverage company, working with a really fun client there. And I'm not going to be thinking about the uh, design company that supports nonprofits. I'm not going to be working on the design company with the Italian partners. I segment my work day into chunks, and I segment my work week into chunks, and do as I say, not as I do, because I'm no expert at this. I got to be honest with you. I know that there's no substitute for hard work. I know that I have to be better than my cited competition in everything that I do, but I also know very well that I can only do so much, and I'm
Yeah.
always battling with that.
Okay. So it's a work in process.
You know it.
But I do think this way of like chunking it so you're focused on this company for a period of time, and then that actually makes sense. And also, when you were talking earlier about how you have kind of a hyper ability to focus, that may make you more productive
It
overall.
does. It definitely has to. Yeah. Yeah. And
That makes sense to me.
just basically saying, okay, I'm not going to worry about if it's dark or if it's light. If it's time to work, it's time to work. And by the way, I have this funny thing. So I'm totally blind since birth. So my circadian rhythm isn't quite set. And I know there's companies that sell medication for this, and I don't want to take any medication for it. But some nights I just have a hard time going to sleep, and I'll get up and work.
Mm-hmm.
And some days I'll be really tired during the day and, sleep a little bit during the day because I know it's warm out. It's, oh my gosh, the weather is just beautiful here in California right now. It's about 70 degrees and lovely. And I know that the sun's out, but to me, that is a notion that the sun is out. That is not, okay, Hoby, body, you need to be awake because the lights are on.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing.
Yeah. So this kind of goes back to the conversation we were having a bit when you were talking about the book that you're writing and not to judge a book by its cover. And I think that going back to what you said, that sighted people rely on their sight for 90 to 95% of their sensory processing, that I think it will be a lot of work for sighted people to not make snap judgments. And we all make a lot of assumptions every day, and our brain uses this information to make hundreds or probably thousands of tiny unconscious or subconscious decisions, like should I turn left or right? I mean, they don't have to be big decisions. Many of them are very small
Correct.
decisions.
But they all add up to
So are
something
there
huge.
assumptions that you observe commonly made by sighted people that you would like to address or that you could mention? And I think, when we were having that earlier conversation, which again, I think could be an entire podcast. And when you write your book, maybe you'll come back and talk about it.
Cannot wait.
It is, and I am just as guilty of this as the next sighted person, which is that I definitely judge people based on what they are wearing, what kind of jewelry they're wearing. Are they wearing makeup? What kind of clothing are they wearing? And I try not to do that, but I think my brain
subconscious
gets the better of me.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you have tips for how to stop doing that or lessen that, but I do think it would get us closer to that awareness or consciousness that Deepak Chopra was talking about.
For me, it's a matter of just really approaching every situation how you would want to be approached. I don't, and I'm just going to be honest with you and share something personal. I'm always judging myself. I never feel like I'm doing a good enough job. I'm always saying, okay, what can I be doing better? How can I be fixing this? How can I, so I'm always questioning that and pushing myself forward. But I think that for me, it's about different experiences in life. It's about doing more things and exposing yourself to things that are a little bit not comfortable that really helps me not judge books by their cover. So having those conversations with people I wouldn't normally talk to, having those deep dives with folks that we're not necessarily acquainted with or used to talking to that we're worried about that might be, quite frankly, difficult. I think those are the things that make us the less judgmental people that we can be. I get really frustrated by folks who need to drive the flashy car. Like, what good does that do if you're seeing for a split second in your really shiny, beautiful hot rod car? Like, what is that doing for you? I believe in driving what you want to drive because it's comfortable and it feels right and it's the right thing for you. But that doesn't have to be something incredibly gaudy, incredibly flashy. And, look at this country and the amount of money that we spend that a lot of folks spend without having, to be perfectly honest with you, to look a certain way, to drive a certain car, to live in a certain home, that I fear has very little to do with what do I need to be comfortable and has more to do with what can I do to look good. And I just get worried about it. It's like, okay, this is really tough. Justin, my partner, who I've mentioned many times here, lives in Norway. And Norway is very much more practical about stuff like this. They're not buying fancy cars and fancy houses just to show a certain status. They're all sort of content. And Norway is a very wealthy country because of their oil reserves, as you know. But I think that gives them the opportunity to just be sort of content with who they are. And I personally can tell you, like, I'm renting a place. I've got a nice big garage. I've got a nice yard. I'm getting a decent rate on my rent. And I'm just plain happy with who I am. And I don't need to drive anything special or do anything special. I'm just who I am. And it's easy for me to do that because I'm not sucked into the vortex of how am I being judged? What do other people think? But again, I'm not naive. I'm always questioning what people think and judging myself and this sort of thing. But to me, my best self is not what I look like on the outside. It's what people see on the inside.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I am not an expert in this field. I'm not a psychologist or anything, but I do think that when people are excessively focused on what they look like or what car they're
Mm-hmm.
driving or those kinds of things, that they are actually, it's the judging yourself most of the
Right.
time. It's not actually what other people think. It's just that you view them as a reflection, and it's having trouble sort of doing that looking within,
100%.
which is probably the hardest work of all. I mean, if we're going
100%.
to talk about the hard work.
Yeah,
So
it is true.
hopefully in your book you'll address some of these things and maybe give us some tips on how we can work on it.
Well, I need to figure that out myself, but I would love to have that opportunity and be able to share that stuff. Yeah.
Hobie, is there anything that I have not asked you about in this part of the conversation? And I do want to talk a little bit about our products, and I have 5 questions I ask everybody in every episode. But before we get there, is there anything that I haven't asked that I should have asked, or that you would like to tell our listeners?
Absolutely. I do have some things that I want to share. The first one is your brain is the thing that is your guiding force. And if you live with an abundance mindset and a mindset of positivity, you can do whatever you want to do. Your brain is the only thing in the way of holding yourself back from your wildest dreams. And it's the only thing in the way of you achieving your wildest dreams. So if you open your mind to whatever the possibilities may become that may arrive at your doorstep, you will be able to do whatever it is you want to do. And there are 3 things that I always like to share whenever I have the opportunity. Number 1, we are not alone in this world. Every one of us is here to work with other people to make great things happen, right? So you're not alone. Number 2, you're enough. What you do, as long as you deliver your personal best every opportunity you get, as it doesn't have to be as good as your idols or anyone like that. As long as you deliver your personal best, you are enough. You are doing your part, and you should hold your head high and be proud of that. And number 3, every one of us is amazing. There's something that you do that is amazing that people will look up to. So you're not alone. You're enough, and you're amazing. Remember that as you go through life, because it's the power that will make or break any opportunity you have. And it's also the power that will allow us to have the difficult conversations and also maintain the love, trust, and respect in one another that we need to have those chats.
I started the On the Table podcast to coincide with and amplify the mission of my brand, Amatand, an elevated everyday tabletop brand with a goal of increasing connectedness among people. Each week, we send our guests a product or 2 from our current collection. Hoby, you received 2 of our ivory hand-thrown ceramic mugs, our lavender Earl Grey tea, our our own design wooden appetizer spoon, and our strawberry rhubarb jam.
I love that
I've
spoon.
gifted, I know, I love it too.
Oh,
So I've gifted our ceramic mug to a number of guests, and honestly, I will never tire of talking about it. And you and I talked a little bit about it before we started
we
recording.
did.
So we iterated on the shape and the glaze of the mug. I just love the feel of it in my
I
hands.
love it.
I was telling you that we had so many iterations on how the handle attaches to the
Yeah.
mug. And I just wanted a shape that was a bit different and very easy to pick up and hold.
Tell me what some of
I love that
because
it's
I'm a design
dishwasher.
nerd, Ashley. What were some of the iterations?
So there's one that's more typically kind of like, I would say the shape of an ear.
Hmm.
It's kind of, or like a half
Like a
heart.
little curvy.
And it's harder to get your
Yeah.
fingers in there, in my
Yeah.
opinion,
I hear you.
with with that shape. I also just don't love the way that the shape looks aesthetically.
Sure.
Um, I wanted your finger to be able to rest, like your thumb to be able to rest on the top of where it
Like
attaches.
so.
Yes, like
Yeah.
so. And so those were the main things. And I wanted something that was a bit different, that's just not something that everybody
Yeah.
has.
Yeah.
So those were the
I
things.
love it. And I love, you know what else I love about this mug is the weight. It has heft. It is a real mug. When I pick it up, I can feel the heft.
Yes.
I love that.
I love that too. I love that too. And we talked a little bit about the glaze, like the imperfections.
Yeah.
And so we experimented with like a glossy glaze and we went with a matte glaze
Yes.
because I feel like you can just connect to it more.
You know what your products remind me of, Ashley, a little bit, and I don't. You can choose to include this in the episode or not, but one of my favorite brands of ceramics is Heath Ceramics in Sausalito, and
Yes.
I get that total vibe from what you're building.
Thank you. That is such a compliment.
Yeah, I love it. I love your stuff.
Thank you. Um, and then, so you were talking about the wooden spoon. So
Yes.
during COVID, I started eating soup with a wooden spoon. I was doing a lot of reading
Hmm.
and cooking, like many people were. And I ordered some really beautiful spoons from
Yeah.
Asia, where it's more typical to eat soup with a wooden spoon. I
Right.
don't know if you've ever done
I
that.
have not.
It is, it's a highly recommend.
Oh
So
my gosh.
the wood doesn't conduct heat the way that our typical
Right.
tableware does.
Right.
And it just makes, honestly, I think, for a more pleasant experience. So my goal is to actually make a wooden soup spoon eventually.
I love it.
But we were having a lot of trouble. Wood can be very difficult to work with. So we started with a smaller format
Hmm.
with our wooden spoon. And it's great for jam or hummus or olives or
I can
yogurt.
see that.
I actually do eat yogurt with it, which I think most people wouldn't do.
I love that.
But so it's acacia. It's lightweight and yet sturdy, and it's porous, so it doesn't hold on to food flavors, and it's naturally resistant to
So it's
bacteria.
acacia wood.
It's acacia.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that.
And the strawberry rhubarb jam comes from a small operation in the Hudson Valley. It's actually a husband and wife operation, and they obtain their fruit from surrounding farms. So it's probably, I don't know if there are places near you that do that, but obviously
There
with
are
the
some.
wine, there's a lot of
Yes.
that.
Tell me where
Um,
the Hudson
so
Valley is. I feel a little bit ignorant.
it's near New York.
Yeah. Okay. The Hudson River Valley.
Yes.
Got
Yes.
it. Got it.
So love any comments you have so far. You've already obviously given me wonderful comments on the mug.
So,
And because we do design these products predominantly ourselves, we're always looking for feedback so we can iterate on the design.
so the tea's delicious. The tea's really nice. I think pulling back a little bit on the lavender and increasing the sort of black tea note would be really cool. But I absolutely love what you've done there. I think it's incredible. I actually have used that amazing little wooden spoon for when we've been at the table and serving, if you have a little bit of sauce in the center of the table, it works great for scooping that. It also works great for use it in the kitchen for salt. It's just there's a beautiful feel. It's nice and beautiful in the hand. And I must admit that I have yet to try the amazing strawberry rhubarb jam. So when I do, I will send you an email and or voice memo about it. I plan to try it tomorrow morning on bread. And I'm sorry I didn't get a
Perfect.
chance to try it today.
Oh, don't be silly. Don't be silly. Well, thank you so much for all of that feedback.
Yeah,
So, at the end of every episode, I like to ask the same 5 questions to round out our
let's do it.
discussion. Okay, so my first question is, as we explore in my brand, Amatand, objects can hold a lot of meaning for us. They can tie us to the past, enable us to enjoy the present moment more, or even take us into the future. Can you share an object from your life, whether you still have it or not, that holds a lot of meaning for you, and tell us why?
Wow, that's a fantastic question. For me, an object that holds a great deal of value is my calculator that I used to get through my high school career, because it really is what painted my picture and my life and my experience over time, and what got me to where I am now in school. So I still have that talking calculator, and I still use it on my desk whenever I need it. And that is really important to me. The other object that I would say is super cool and important to me, um, is a really wonderful, and this is a little bit weird, but a few years ago when I was traveling through Italy, I collected a chestnut off the street, and that chestnut gives me luck and courage, and it's in my jacket pocket that I wear every day, and it always sticks with me because it's just something I found on my own that means the world.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Thanks.
Can you share a favorite tradition with us? It could be something from when you were a child with your family, or something you do with your partner today,
Oh my gosh.
something from, I don't know, your
I'm
travels,
I'm
anything.
going to share something really simple and then something really specific. So, Justin and I don't like to eat out much at all because we love cooking, and that's our thing. That's what we do, right? So, for me, the tradition that I love more than anything is getting home from work on a weeknight. Tonight's a good example. And opening a bottle of wine, having a glass of wine together, and cooking an amazing meal together. That's so important to me. And it's something that I cherish immensely. Very specifically, my grandmother, on my father's side of the family, would cook an Italian dish called cannelloni, which is a rolled pasta dish, where pasta is essentially rolled around a meat filling, and the dish has a nice bechamel sauce blended with tomato sauce. And my grandmother lived a combination between Acapulco, Mexico, and Colorado Springs, just north of Colorado Springs, Colorado. So she was never quite near me in California. She knew this was my favorite dish, and every time I saw her, the first night we were together, we'd eat this amazing pasta. And she passed away back in 2021, but I will always remember that amazing opportunity eating the pasta
Do you make that dish
all the
today?
time.
Do you
I
plan
can I
your
can make
meals like,
next time you're in the Bay Area, you better tell me
yeah,
and I'll make it for you.
that sounds amazing.
Okay?
Do you plan your meals out, or are you more impromptu?
Totally
Like, I'm going to
impromptu.
the totally
And you know what?
impromptu.
I shop every day. I do not like this American way of buying a bunch of food for the week and then just not going to the store, 'cause I don't know what I want tomorrow night. I just don't know.
Well, you're very European. I spent a year in France in
Yes.
college and
Do you speak French?
poorly.
I just got back from Cognac. We're working with a client to bring Cognac into the United States, and just had an amazing 5 days there. And yeah, it is very European, and I have a deep love for Italy and France and Europe in general. And as I said, Justin's half Norwegian, so it's, we are at the store every day.
Yeah, that's
I love
amazing.
it.
I'm definitely coming for dinner.
Come,
Okay.
hang out. Can't wait.
Are you in a phase in your life where you enjoy entertaining in your home? Why or why not?
I love entertaining in my home. I have always loved entertaining in my home because I just love doing my little art form for people and having them appreciate what I do. It's just great fun for me and brings me joy to cook for people. So I love that. My house isn't the right size for entertaining large groups, but I'll tell you a story that was so much fun for me and Justin. During COVID, we bought four little tables, little 3 foot by 3 foot tables to fit in our yard, in our back patio. And we would host, I was very careful because I certainly didn't want to lose my sense of smell and taste, right?
Yeah.
And we were very careful and we did all the cooking, but we would invite people over. We would invite up to four couples, including ourselves, over for dinner. And we would sit outside and do these dinner parties. And it was just this amazingly rewarding experience for all of us that just I'll never forget.
That's
Oh,
wonderful.
so much fun.
So much fun. Do you have one or two top resources, could be a book or a website or a course that you can recommend to our listeners?
For what purpose?
It could be for any purpose. So it could have something to do with your profession or your personal story or just a favorite.
One of
You
my
like to read a
one of
lot.
my
So.
favorite things to do is listen to great cooking shows on the radio or on TV. And the Splendid Table from American Public Media on National Public Radio is one of my absolute favorite shows. And I loved it so much when Lynn Rossetto Casper was the host. I did an interview with Lynn, and Lynn wrote a book in the late 1990s called The Splendid Table, which is very tied to what you do, all about cooking and amazing recipes from Emilia-Romagna, which is an amazing region of Italy. Lynn Rossetto Casper wrote The Splendid Table about amazing recipes that she discovered in Emilia-Romagna, which is the food capital of Italy. And that to me is so incredibly special. I also really love Brene Brown, and I love Dare to Lead by Brene. It's just an amazing book.
I haven't read it. I've definitely heard her speak,
It's
but I
worth
haven't read
reading.
it. So I think I'll get it.
Yeah, take a look at
Okay.
it. But also, please look at The Splendid Table and
Absolutely.
listen to old
I'm in.
episodes with Lynn. She's just incredible. She's so,
Okay.
oh my God. Ashley, I can't tell you enough how important it is to listen to Lynn.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm on it.
yeah. That's awesome.
Okay. Last question. What do you do for yourself? Do you have a practice, a focus, a habit, or a daily routine that you adhere to that contributes to your success or just your well being?
My aunt was a Buddhist minister and did some work under, not directly with Deepak Chopra, but we talked about him earlier. She's definitely worked with him at times. And she ended up just recently, back in December, taking her life after a long battle with ALS, which was a very moving and emotional experience. But what she's taught me in so many ways is the importance of having a daily practice that you can work with every day. And so when I wake up, I meditate for a little while and I tell myself, what is it that you want to, or I ask myself what I want to accomplish in the day. And I use that to get up and ease into the day. This is not a routine, it's a daily thing, but my special happy place is a park right near me where I've actually gone walking with your sister Jennifer, called Tule Lake Park. And it's just a beautiful park with easy to navigate trails. And I'm able to be just at one with nature there every time I go. And I love it immensely. So those two things, as much as I can, are what I think contribute to success and to open-mindedness and consciousness and thoughtfulness in so many ways.
Hoby, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been wonderful talking with you. I do feel like I know you, even though I just met you.
Ashley,
And I've learned so much, and I really want your book, so you've got to write it.
I'm going to write it. I'm going to get that done. And it is such a joy to speak with you and such a joy to come together with you and make this happen. I'm honored, and I just want I want everybody to know that don't be a stranger. Reach out to me anytime. My website is hobywedler.com. My email address is Hoby, Hoby, at Hoby Wedler, HOBYWEDLER.com. Reach out anytime you want. Let's make friends. Let's have fun. And let's make the world a better place by having those challenging but so important conversations.
Let's do it. I look forward to continuing a friendship with you.
I can't wait, Ashley.
Thanks for listening to an episode of On the Table with Ashley. Subscribing to, rating, and reviewing our podcast helps us to continue to record great interviews. So please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're interested in learning more about the products we talked about on the show, visit amattendre.com. That's AMEATENDRE.com to check them out. When you become a member by sharing your email on our website, we'll share special discounts that relate to products discussed on each episode. Finally, email us at reachoutanytime@amattendre.com with thoughts you have or ideas for topics or guests for future episodes. Thanks for listening.